Big news out of Washington this week. The FTC is investigating OpenAI around the potential harms of ChatGPT. Welcome back to the AI Breakdown. OpenAI has been pretty busy this week. We saw a 6-year deal with Shutterstock, which will give OpenAI access to train on their images, as well as integrate their tools into Shutterstock's platform. And they also have a deal with the AP. Still, the bigger news was that the Federal Trade Commission has opened an investigation into OpenAI around the potential harms of ChatGPT. The news was first reported by the Washington Post and focuses on a few different areas of potential harm. One of those is whether ChatGPT has appropriate data collection practices. A second question is whether there's been harm to consumers around false information, hallucinations, things like that come from ChatGPT. And additionally, the FTC is also asking about OpenAI's security practices. Now, all of this was included in a 20-page letter that was sent to OpenAI this week, and that letter is trying to get a ton of information from the company. They want to know about how they train their models, how they treat personal data, and more. And the question ultimately is whether OpenAI, quote, engaged in unfair or deceptive practices relating to risks of harm to consumers. Now, OpenAI has talked quite openly about their belief that the AI sector needs more regulation. Sam Altman has even testified before Congress about exactly that. This, however, represents the first time that they're potentially on the bad end of a regulatory action. And it seems he didn't super love how the whole thing was handled. Altman tweeted, "It is very disappointing to see the FTC's request start with a leak and does not help build trust. That said, it's super important to us that our technology is safe and pro-consumer, and we are confident we follow the law. Of course, we will work with the FTC. We built GPT-4 on top of years of safety research and spent 6+ months after we finished initial training, making it safer and more aligned before releasing it. We protect user privacy and design our systems to learn about the world, not private individuals. We're transparent about the limitations of our technology, especially when we fall short, and our capped profit structure means we aren't incentivized to make unlimited returns." Now, for those of you watching, what I have on the screen now is the specific FTC document that was sent to OpenAI and that was later leaked to the Washington Post. To give a sense of the questions, we have full legal addresses, identify subsidiaries, parent companies, etc. The request asks for information about the team, how many people there are, who owns big percentages of the company, what their earnings look like. They want to know the web of relationships, whether it's partnerships or something else, the corporate governance model, all the different products and public statements thereof. And then they get into the meat of the request, which has to do with the products that have actually made it to the public. The FTC letter requests describe in detail each large language model product with each version of each product listed separately, and they want a ton of information about each of those different products. There is a lot in here about how they've marketed products to customers, asking specifically for their biggest enterprise customers in terms of who they are, how they've identified them, how they've pitched them, etc. Question 15 is a thorny one. It says, describe in detail the data you have used during or prior to the applicable time period to train or otherwise develop each large language model described in response to question 9. They want to know how they obtained the data, all sources of the data, a list of websites data was derived from, all policies around identifying and vetting data, how much the data varies across languages, and more. In total, there are 49 questions here, along with a request for 17 different types of documents. Now, going back to the Washington Post article, they paint the FTC as fairly aggressive as relates to consumer protection in AI. They point to an article they wrote on April 25th called "Federal Regulators Call AI Discrimination a New Civil Rights Frontier," in which they quote FTC Chair Lina Khan, who said there is no AI exemption to the laws on the books. Now, right now, the FTC is a highly politicized organization in Washington. The Washington Post wrote, "News of the probe broke shortly before FTC Chair Lina Khan faced a combative hearing Thursday before the House Judiciary Committee, where Republican lawmakers analyzed her enforcement record and accused her of mismanaging the agency." The Post also pointed out that on Tuesday, a federal judge had rejected the FTC's attempt to block Microsoft's $69 billion acquisition of Activision. Some of the representatives at the hearing asked specifically about this potential enforcement action. Dan Bishop, Republican from North Carolina, asked Khan what legal authority empowered her and the FTC to make these demands of OpenAI. And indeed, how much authority the FTC has in this case is a big question. Adam Kovacevic, the founder and CEO of the Chamber of Progress, said that while it's clear that the FTC had oversight of data security and misrepresentation, it's not clear whether they had the authority to, quote, police defamation or the contents of ChatGPT's results. Now, as you might imagine, there are a lot of hot takes on this on Twitter. Some fall in line with the Tech Oversight Project, who tweets, "Rushing AI products to market without protecting consumers, ensuring safety, and promoting competition is reckless and irresponsible. We applaud the FTC for taking steps to protect the American people." Senator Ed Markey basically said that this would be good in helping them get the information they needed to actually regulate the industry. He tweeted, We can't combat what we don't comprehend. This action from the FTC will help us better understand the risks posed by AI technology like ChatGPT, but Congress must go farther to stop current and future harm from this emerging technology. One thing you'll note is the language here. We can't combat what we don't comprehend. He might not have meant it like this, but the inescapable conclusion is that ChatGPT is something not that is an unbelievable example of American innovation, but which is something that needs to be combated. However, on the flip side, there was a lot of questioning around the authority that the FTC did or didn't have as related to this particular issue. Representative Dan Bishop built on his comments to the Washington Post, tweeting, "Just before this hearing, it was reported that the FTC is investigating OpenAI. They're demanding information on if ChatGPT generates false, misleading, or disparaging statements. Is the FTC now in the business of regulating speech? How are they claiming that authority?" Now, David Kroom followed a similar line but suggested a different approach that might be better in line with the FTC's mandate. He said, "In a civil subpoena to the company made public Thursday, the FTC says its investigation of ChatGPT focuses on whether OpenAI has engaged in unfair or deceptive practices relating to risks of harm to consumers, including reputational harm. One question asks the company to, quote, describe in detail the extent to which you have taken steps to address or mitigate risks that your large language model products could generate statements about real individuals that are false, misleading, or disparaging." Kroom continues, "It might be more fruitful to pursue an investigation into potential plagiarism and copyright violations. That seems to be more in line with the FTC's regulatory authority than policing the internet for defamation." And indeed, a lot of people felt that this was way, way more political than they were comfortable with. Spellcraft AI founder Lewis writes, "I have a lot of problems with OpenAI, but this investigation is plainly politically motivated BS." David Marcus, who was formerly at Meta running their Libra project and who is now the founder of a Lightning company on Bitcoin, writes, "Oh, FFS, we cannot become the country that is anti-innovation. Innovation, entrepreneurship, and yes, capitalism, and our value system is what made us into the greatest nation. Foster and encourage it, don't dissuade and kill it." Now, lest one be tempted to see this exclusively along partisan lines, Adam Kovacevic, who was quoted in that Washington Post piece, lists himself as a Democrat and technological optimist. He said, "I've read the FTC's subpoena to OpenAI. It's basically seeking a complete peek under the hood of how ChatGPT works. It covers data security and deception, where FTC has clear authority, but also copyright and defamation, where it doesn't." And at the end of the day, a lot of lay folks felt similar to Ellie Dorado here, who tweeted, "Are there any legal scholars who argue that subpoena power has gone too far? This demand letter from the FTC to OpenAI is basically, please give us all the information that we need to bring an enforcement action against you." Now, what I think is going on has to do with where in the particular cycle we are. We do not yet have comprehensive AI legislation. We don't know if regulatory authority is going to be divided among different offices that seem to touch some part of it, or if there's going to be some entirely new framework, a new department, a new division, a new commission that is created specifically to handle AI. In that type of regulatory vacuum, the thing that happens is bureaucrats and unelected officials race to fill that space with their theses about how their agency has authority over some aspect of the new thing that's happening. Anyone who's spent any time around Bitcoin and crypto over the last 4 years, and especially the last 6 months, has seen this happen to the extreme. And ultimately, the only organization that can solve and address this is Congress. The House and the Senate have to get together and make decisions about how new frontier technologies are going to be regulated, or else it is inevitable that the regulatory agencies will simply do whatever they're going to do. Now, right now, we have battles around this being fought in the Supreme Court with something called the Major Questions Doctrine. The Major Questions Doctrine, which has come up in a recent Supreme Court decision, basically limits the authority of unelected officials to very specific mandates that are handed to them by Congress. And the working thesis among many in these frontier technology areas is that if they are significant enough, which certainly it would seem that AI qualifies for, the regulatory agencies can't just assume authority. They have to wait to be told that they have that authority by Congress itself. Innovation policy analyst at RSI, Adam Therier, writes, "This latest FTC nastygram to a tech company reflects the short-term reality of AI regulation in the US. We'll witness a lot of job owning and regulation by intimidation through implicit threats of undefined action. By nastygram, I mean a letter sent by a policymaker or agency that asks probing questions backed by the implicit threats of undefined future regulatory action. It's a long-standing agency practice, but one the FTC is using more regularly to influence firm decisions. The FCC was a real pioneer of the regulation by intimidation and nastygram strategy. We called it regulation by raised eyebrow in the old days. Job owning is the more popular phrase today, but that term does not fully capture what is going on when agencies use broader threats. The most crucial part of the regulation by intimidation playbook is the idea of voluntary concessions, which are not voluntary at all, of course. But agencies know if they can extract such concessions without formal regulation, they can skirt constitutional challenges. Now, Adam has a whole blog post about this called The Biden Administration's Plan to Regulate AI Without Waiting for Congress, and I will, of course, link to that in the notes of this document. Anyways, guys, I'm not sure ultimately how impactful this particular action will be, but I do think it's reflective of the state of AI regulation. It's a reminder of the urgency of Congress getting together to figure out what it thinks, because in the absence of that clarity, the agencies are just going to flood in. Now, to the extent that you want counterbalancing power thrown at AI companies, no matter what the legal precedent, this could be seen as a good thing. And I don't think that the issues raised by the FTC are necessarily things that shouldn't be addressed. However, it's hard to argue that this process, with agencies each following their own agenda in an uncoordinated fashion, is ultimately going to be good either for consumer protection or for innovation. Anyways, guys, that is where we will wrap for today. If you're enjoying the AI Breakdown, please go share it with one or two other people that you think would find value in it. I'd love to grow the community organically, and that would help a huge amount. Until next time, guys, peace.